Okay, we're live. Here we are. This is an experiment. I'll just get that right off the bat, get it out of the way. I don't expect anything to come from this. I just want to see what happens. One of the benefits of doing something with no audience whatsoever, because this channel only has 2 subscribers. One of them is me. What I'm going to do today, or what I want to do today, we'll see what happens, is experiment with, I guess with just talking about a topic alone. And if this works, I might go to once a month, but this YouTube video is just going to be kind of like forcing me to sit down and actually talk about this instead of wishy-washing and going back and forth. And I'll talk about it later. I don't have time now. I've set aside this time, and I want to talk about, in this case today, basic income, because I've been thinking about it a lot for the last several years. I've talked about it. I've made a video about it, done all kinds of research about it, and I guess it was probably Kurzgesagt's video about basic income. This was this week, I guess, the end of this week. And it just encouraged me to want to talk about it because I felt like they did a pretty good job talking about it. But they were talking at the beginning of the episode about UBI. They were talking about the downsides. They mentioned that there would be some upsides and there would also be some downsides of universal basic income. And then I felt like in the video, maybe I need to watch it more than once, but I felt like during the video, I didn't really hear any downsides. There were potential downsides presented, but I didn't actually see or hear any evidence of downsides to the program. This is not going to be like a normal podcast. I'm going to take breaks and I'm going to bring up data. I made a spreadsheet. I guess I've never really shared it with anyone, but I guess if I publish this episode, I will have to share it so you can see what's going on. Maybe I'll share it on YouTube. See. Again, this is mostly just to force me to actually talk about it instead of saying I should and then never doing it. We're moving stuff around in this bedroom, which will cease to be a bedroom that I can do stuff in a few months, but that's a whole other story. Needless to say, there's a lot of stuff in this room that hasn't been here in previous weeks or months. So I'm going to try to share this. And by try, I mean I am going to share this. Okay. So this is a spreadsheet I made looking at universal basic income, how it would work in Canada. Now, it's a very complicated looking spreadsheet. It's got a lot of big numbers on it. But the main idea here is I took some census data. Well, I don't know if it's actually census data or if it's like Canada Revenue Agency data. But I took this data here, which are from past years, this being the most recent data here. So all income groups, 26.8 million, breaks it down by how much money they make. So under $5,000 is 1.8 million, which is kind of the reason why I'm even thinking about doing this. If there's 1.8 million people living on under $5,000 a year, that is amazingly bad. That works out to 6.88% of Canadians. So it goes up in kind of $5,000 increments from 5,000 up to 35,000, and then it starts to jump 50,000, 75,000, 100,000, 150, 200, and then 250. So what I did to create little kind of income brackets is take the midpoints of each of those numbers. So 5,000 and 10,000, I picked 7,500. So I picked the midpoint of between each of these two each of these dollar amount groups, and I split them and then put the number that resulted at the end here. Um, there's a group here that the final group, the high end money group of having over $250,000. There are 164,220. That is a group that's going to be the most difficult to guess how many people are in higher income brackets, because obviously the higher income you have, the more you're going to contribute money to the economy. And looking at, if you try to pin an average on that, you're going to get you need a weighted average. You're not going to get anything near accurate trying to guess any average salary for that high end of income, that so-called like 1%. And the 1% in Canada is pretty much at that $250,000 mark. As the data shows here, it's 0.89%, basically 1%. Interestingly, there's actually, as you can see, between $200,000 and $250,000, there's still only 0.55%. There's actually fewer people in that bracket, which again suggests to me that there are people in that higher bracket that, like, if things were broken out more evenly, you'd see an actual distribution of things going up. But because everybody's lumped into that 250,000 and over, you get an outsized portion in that group. So the next thing I did to get a better sense of that 250,000 group was to look up the number of billionaires in Canada. And so as you can see here, this column matches what I said before. So when I split the midpoint of the income group, so between 0 and 5,000, I put them at an average of 2,500. That may not be accurate, but I think for the purposes of this, it's a relatively small portion of the overall kind of budget of this universal basic income calculation. So I'm fine with it. It's actually easily the smallest section, even though, again, there's 1.8 million people in it. It's just $4 billion total income. For 1.8 billion or 1.8 million people. The next bracket up, 7,500. So I again picked the midpoints. You can see after $225,000, there's still 5 brackets that I used. What I used there is kind of an exponential decrease in the number of people. So to make them, I made the math work out as best I could, with the knowledge that there were 22 people that had over 2.75 billion individually, which is information that I found from a list of Canadians by net worth on Wikipedia, which is sourced. So I'll take it for as much as it's worth. But that gave around 22 people with over kind of that salary number. And then from there, I just extrapolated down and said that as you get one order of magnitude less money, there would be about 10 times more people with that. So that puts about 220 people at 275 million, which again kind of works out with the list of net worth. It went down into the millions, so that's a plausible number. And then in between there, 27 million, put about 2,000, which is again less than 1% of the population. Combined, all of those are less than 1% of the population. And then into millionaires, you get down to 21,500. The goal of this was to make all the numbers work out. And so population numbers, total money numbers, and then kind of getting that 1% from the other table, having that number match up to 0.89%, which it does now. So I'm satisfied with this. It may not be perfect, but for the purposes of this demonstration, this doesn't have to be exactly Canada. I just wanted to use an example of a country whose income was somewhat like Canada. So yeah, this is the percentage of the population, the number of people in that group that corresponds to this population percentage, and then the income that the average person in that income bracket would have. So again, that midpoint as being an estimate of the number of people having that income. The sum product here, this is just this number, the number of people times the amount of money. So the product there, you see that uh, kind of middle class, 62,500 per year, brings in the largest portion of money, $269 billion. Uh, and so what I did, so this means that in this universal basic income uh, pilot type idea, we are working with $1.5 trillion. So that's the amount of money that the people of Canada make under these estimations. So like individually held income as such. The next thing here, column E, is a tax. It is the amount of money that universal basic income would take away. And so this is changeable. So these are all formulas. This number, 35%, is the amount of tax on each person. So with under universal basic income, the way that I have seen it presented best, each person in a given group, whether it be Ontario or Canada or the world, they're all taxed the same percent amount. There's just a flat, straight across the board tax. This tax actually, theoretically, there's two different possibilities here that I've seen or that I've thought about. The first one being keep all existing social net structures in place, keep all existing taxation in place, and then the universal basic income tax would be on top of that. Now, that might not be necessarily as popular as the idea that all taxes are kind of ramped out and the universal basic income is brought in on along with that, kind of ramped up. But that the idea being that money replaces the social structures. Now, I think in either case, I'm comfortable with either. The idea being that I don't think you can tax someone on a flat percent basis per person without kind of changing the amount of the percent that you pay based on your income. I don't see how you can tax someone too much if you're giving it back to them an equal share based on UBI, because the poorer you are, the more this will help you. The more the amount you get back will be more than the amount you paid in. But so the poor people under this system will only get richer. There's no way that they will get poorer. They may stay this, like if you are at around the line that is set as the poverty line, the line that universal basic income sets for you, that's the only situation where you come out even under this plan or under this idea. But a rich person is never going to be made poor by this plan, because if you have $1 million, you are taxed $500,000. And while that is seemingly objectively a lot of money, you're not going to be poor with $500,000. You're just not. And the money that you are putting into the tax system is basically giving back to the society that allowed you to thrive that much. That's the main argument here, is that you can succeed in society, but like I believe it was Isaac Newton that is at least quoted as saying, or maybe it was Albert Einstein, if I've seen as far as I have, or if I've come as far as I have, it's because I've been standing on the shoulders of giants. And that idea holds true in science just as much as it does in society. No person succeeds alone, and any mogul or business titan of industry has gotten to where they are on their own, on their merits of just their own ideas. People are helping them. They get support. They get tax credits, for instance. So you can see here that currently this is set to 35% flat tax rate, which means that someone who has an income of $2,500 will pay $8,500 in tax, $875, which again seems like, hey, that's quite a bit of money for someone who has $2,500. Yes, it's 35%. Somebody who, like I said, so the poor, nobody is completely ruined under this system because that $2,500, they lose $875 to tax. But you come out with, you're kind of setting things, you set things up so that you're trying to aim for a certain specific number. So in this case, if we set the poverty line to be $20,000 a year, you would set the tax bonus that you get to around $20,000 per year. And so the person that has 2,500, they put in 875 and they get out 19,449, which is a total of $21,074.71. Which means that for this person who was making $2,500 a year before, their wealth change is 842%, 843%. They are getting back 800% more than their income, which sounds like too much. But you have to keep in mind that they were living on, like, between rent, between, if they even have a home, they're between rent, between clothes, between food, between potentially caring for children. They only have $2,500 a year. That works out to, I don't even want to calculate it because it's going to be such a tiny amount of money. 2,500 divided by 365, $6.85 per day, which I don't know how you could survive and actually live a reasonable life with that kind of amount of spending that you can have per day. That includes rent. Like that, it's just not a possible thing. So getting someone to $21,074, that's a massive amount of help that person can get. Moving up to the next tax bracket, the next income bracket, 7,500. You see here that these people, these 1.6 million, again, $7,500 a year is not enough. 7,500 divided by 365 is $12.32. That's not any different than $8 or whatever it was before. That's not enough to live on. That's not enough to live any kind of life on. The people with $7,500 income would pay $2,600 into this plan. So, and again, because we've set a 35% flat tax, the amount of UBI that you get under that is $19,449.71, just like the very poorest person, which means that they come out. The best part about this plan to me is that it still rewards work, depending on what you set the tax percent at. It rewards work more or less, but the idea that somebody wouldn't want to work because they can be at the poverty line is kind of ridiculous. Nobody would voluntarily just make $21,074 for their entire life. Like, there's just no humans, and this has been shown. This isn't just me saying this, but humans have been shown when they do basic income trials, people who started with nothing or who had very little income don't stop working. They don't stop looking for work. They don't stop looking for things to do. They're just not fighting to survive anymore. And you can see that here, that it's not like someone who has $7,500 is going to just stop working when they get basic income. I mean, that may happen with a small percentage of the population, but the idea here is that if you start off making 3 times more in this bottom income bracket, if you start making $7,500, you end up with $24,324. So the work that you're doing to earn that $7,500, whether it's a minimum wage job, whether it's being able to work part-time and take care of a family, you're still earning. The difference between these two brackets, between $7,500 and $2,500 initial income, is a little over $3,000 per year, which means that if you stop working, you're going to lose that extra $3,000. And so whether it's worth it to you to continue to work to get that extra money, you still have extra earning potential. It's not like it's not that there's a disincentive to work, because the incentive to work is still there. You still make more money if you work more. It's just that 35% of it goes back into the system. Like, again, it's kind of each individual person paying the debt that they owe to society for getting them to where they are, to getting them the opportunity to work or to pursue their passions. So if we move up to the next tax bracket, 12,500, that still works out to 12,500 divided by 365, $34 a day. At that point, I think I lived part of a year of my life at that in student housing in university where I was probably closer to 20,000 than 12,000, but $35 a day. At that point, you can probably afford some very low rent. That puts, if you're paying just rent, that puts you at $1,000 a month. So that's quite a bit. But if you're wanting to put food and clothes and I don't know, like bus pass, for instance, that's still not enough money to really survive. If you're in that tax bracket with 12,000 income, you pay $4,000 in, still 35% of your income. This is the point is that this is a fair system. It's not that poor people don't have to pay any money. It's that you pay 35% of whatever you can make, and so it, it comes out to me as being the fairest system you can possibly have. So again, if you're at this $12,000 income, you come out with 27,000 income. So there's still another from the previous tax bracket. There's still an additional $3,200 of incentive to work. So I'm not going to go through each tax bracket like this, but if you get into kind of middle class, the most populated two income brackets in Canada, 42,500 and 62,500, kind of what I would consider kind of middle class. Under the system, these are also the two that have the highest, or that I guess, along with 87,500, the brackets that have the highest amount of money put in. It ends up with you Yeah. Okay. So, like I was saying, between the two, what I would consider middle class tax brackets, 42,500 and 62,500, they contribute the most overall to, specifically the 62,500 contribute the most overall towards this program. Now, 62,500, that is someone that inarguably does not need um, financial assistance. They may benefit from things like healthcare, and while they definitely benefit from things like healthcare and education, they may benefit more or less to these things depending on what their needs are. But under the system, those people would pay $21,875, which again works out to a little more than the $21,074 that the 2,500 income, the lowest income bracket, would actually get in the end of this. So they are paying quite a bit of money. But again, the amount of money that they're getting out of the system is the same $19,449.71, which means that they started with 62,500, they come out with 60,074. So middle class person would end up paying about a net payment of about $1,500 into the system, which to me seems like absolutely worth it. Like, just inarguably, if it means that you can bring literally, literally, I'll say approximately 20% or so of the population. Let's just figure it out. Excel can do the work for me. 30%. 30% of the population is living below $20,000. If you can, as a middle class person, spend $1,500 a year to bring 30% of the population out of poverty, like, to me, that's an absolute no brainer. It's like $5 a day. And it just seems like the potential kind of downsides, the idea that this is redistribution of wealth, and that the people who spent their life and made $27 million, this 0.0081% of the population, the idea that they have somehow earned this more, that they've somehow earned this, like, literally, what, like 5 orders of magnitude more than someone who's making $2,500 a year, just is completely ridiculous. So someone under this plan, like I mentioned, you can come out slightly less well off, but nobody is going to be so broken by this that they cannot stand it. So that moving up the chain here, there's 5% of people that are in the income bracket of $125,000 a year. There's 1.5 million people in Canada that make approximately $125,000 a year. Those people pay $43,000 and get, again, the same $19,449, which means that going in, they have $125,000. Coming out, they have $100,000. Spending, again, $25,000, putting $25,000 of tax into the system means that what you are putting in, what you are not getting out of the system, can pay for a person who is making $8 a day, can cannot be in poverty. Like, why, at that point, the extra $25,000 a year is not breaking you. It's not changing anything. It's giving stability to someone who needs it, who doesn't have it. The stability that you have, it's not taking away your stability, but it's giving stability to someone else. Moving down the line here, 0.81% of the population, $215,000 people making $400,000 a year. Those people would pay $140,000, going from $400,000 down to $279,000. Again, not breaking anybody's bank whatsoever. You're still making $279,000 a year. You're fine. That net tax works out to 69%, almost 70%. So you're paying a net 30% tax. The only point when the numbers really start to get huge here, I mean, they're already huge for kind of the everyday person, but in terms of actual finance, like when we're talking about multimillionaires here, for example, if you get down to the $275 million, nobody needs that much money. At that point, the system again charges 37 or 35%. You get down to paying $96 million in taxes for universal basic income, which means that your total income, if you make 275 million, is 179, almost 179 million, which to me, if you think that system is unfair, a system in which you only make $178 million, then I don't think I can really help you. But all I can say in terms of this system, you can think it's fair, you can think it's not fair, but I'm going to guess that if you are able to convince someone who is in these top 4 or 5 tax brackets, who is making under or just at the poverty line, if you can convince them to get out and vote, they hold a lot more power than they realize if they are able to actually get invested in the idea of universal basic income and be able to kind of persuade the wealthier people that they are worth paying for. They are worth being over the poverty line. One of the things, so what I will do, what I've done in the past when I made the spreadsheet, is you can play around with the percentage of tax. Like right now it's at 35%, which means that the amount of tax, the amount of universal basic income that everyone gets is $20,000 per year. You can play around with this. If you go to 100% complete redistribution of wealth, this is just essentially communism. And at that point, the person that makes 270 or 2.75 billion, the 22 people that make that come out with $55,000. That's not a system I want to advocate for. That is not valuing the work. And that's where communism fails, I think, is that it doesn't value work. No matter what you do, whether you earn enough to make $2,500 a year working minimum wage, or whether you are a multi-billionaire, you still make $55,000. Like $55,000 is fine to live on, but I don't think this disincentivizes work to me, because you don't have to do anything and you still get all the outcome. If you put the tax rate to 75%, that sets the tax bonus, the universal basic income, at $40,000. That means that is basically double the poverty line, which means that I think that still disincentivizes work a little too much. At that point, it is around $42,000 that you start seeing kind of a net gain in money. I don't think, I think the system isn't unfair to anybody, but I do think that it's still a little too much. Like giving people double the poverty line, like maybe that's a fair system, but I think it's still a little too far. Even 50%, I think is kind of a nice round number. That puts the tax bonus at 27,000, almost 28,000. It means that's kind of the easiest way to deal with just round numbers. That still puts the breaking point of breaking. Even here, you can look at this percent wealth change. It's the people that make around $50,000 that will kind of break even in this system. And if you make more than 50,000, you'll come out with slightly less. If you make less than 50,000, you'll bump up slightly higher. I think we can argue all day long about the right idea of this and the current system. Zero, everyone just keeps the amount of money that they had before. I think even if you put in a 5% flat universal basic income tax, again, this works out to about $27.78. I think one of the most interesting ways that this could work is as like a staggered system. So the first year, it is a 5% tax on income you make that year. The second year of the program, it goes to 10%. Third year of the program, you can ramp it up and see what the outcomes are. As you can see from the percentages here, as I go up to 20%, you're going to get to what, $11,000. You see that no matter no matter what percentage you pick, if you go to 30%, all you're doing is bringing the worst off people up to a position where they're better off. Um, Even something like 33.333%, like one third flat tax, brings us to 18,523, which means that, again, it all kind of depends on where you set the poverty line at. One of the nice things about this, if I go back to 35%. So if you look at this graph here that I've made, if you look at the graph, you can see here the blue line is the initial amount of money you make. So the poverty line here is marked in yellow. You can see that under the initial conditions, the conditions we're all under right now with income, there's a whole bunch of people under the poverty line. This is not weighted in any way. This is just kind of income levels. And so as you can see, if you set the amount of 35% with a $19,500 tax bonus, universal basic income, all you're doing is bringing the worst off people to above the poverty line, and then basically keeping the rate of growth the exact same. So you can see here where the two paths meet here. This is where the system, universal basic income, becomes unnecessary for you. And as you can see, because of the exponential nature of the growth curve past about $400,000 a year, the difference in area between these two curves here on the right-hand side, the money that is in the difference between these two curves is equal to the amount of money that's in the difference between these two curves, just because of the massive amounts of money involved at the very top end. You can see that this graph is actually exponential. If it was a linear graph, it would be even sillier to look at. But it would give you a better idea. So right now it is set to log. It's just, you can't even see the poverty line if you look at this on a proper scale. This is why wealth matters. Like, this is why the area under this graph works out the way that it does. So on a log scale, you can see it a lot better. So again, if we look at this graph under a different proposal, under 50%, for instance, see that all you're doing is bringing this, you can see that all you're doing is bringing this red line higher above the yellow. But again, the difference between these two graphs, the difference between the high end is extremely, extremely similar because of the, again, because of the nature of the logarithmic scale. And here, this with 75% tax, it starts to get a little ridiculous. The difference between these two, basically, once you get above $400,000 a year, you're basically just staying the exact. You're losing the exact same amount of money. If we go back down to say 25%, you can see here that now there are certain people that are below the poverty line. The worst off people get helped almost enough, but not quite. Whereas the people on the top end are barely even affected. And this is on a logarithmic scale. They're barely even affected. If you go to a non-log scale, you can see that these people are literally almost unaffected entirely. Red line here. When you consider the difference between like a blip here and a blip here, compared to the poverty line that is literally overlapping with zero on this scale. Turn log back on because it's much better to see. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at 35%. I think it could be a little bit higher to get the. So I want to talk a little bit, just for a few minutes to wrap up here, about why I think this is such a good idea. And it all kind of comes into sharp focus when you think of potential reasons why somebody might have to not work. And it kind of gets into the main idea of universal basic income as in terms of why we're doing it as a society. Right now, I think the incentive structure in society is a little backwards in that we're not taking care of people. We are all looking out for ourselves. And I don't know, I don't want to say the capitalist system, but the current economic system makes it that way. You can't, most crime, theft, any of that kind of thing comes from unequal income distribution. There's no like uh, rich people are incentivized to quote steal in like tax shelters and offshore accounts and loopholes and all these things in the tax system where people without money are uh, almost forced. They're definitely disincentivized by it being illegal, but there's no real other way for them to get money other than by taking things from other people. And I think that bringing everyone above the poverty line would really disincentivize people from a lot of crime, a lot of theft that ends up happening because there would be no the benefits of crime, having more money are severely outweighed when you actually when the amount you're taking, like if first of all, like petty theft would no longer need to become a thing because if you're making $2,500 a year, that's not enough money. And if you can't get more work than that, what are your other options if you need to feed your family? You're not, if you're making $2,500 a year, stealing a $200 TV or something means that you suddenly have 10% more money. Whereas if you're making $20,000, stealing a $200 TV just seems petty. And again, I don't actually have evidence to back this up, but um, studies that have been done, like the one that was done in Manitoba in the 70s called MinCom, did show a decrease in crime. It showed mothers were more likely to take longer off taking care of their children, or were likely to just take time off and take care of the children when they were born, as opposed to feeling pressure to go back to work. I think that the incentive structure of society is a little backwards when people are when somebody is worried about taking time off from a job they don't actually like, they don't actually enjoy, simply to work because they need money to live. I think that as a society, in terms of being able to use the wealth that we have combined in order to make the lives of everyone better, I just don't see how. The only people who I think would disagree with that are the people who I think value jobs a little too much. The idea that we need to work for someone, like for a company, for instance, is not, it's not taking the right lesson from life. There's not that there's anything wrong with working for a company, but the idea that you should do it even when it's the last thing you want to do seems a little silly. I think the idea that we are all beholden to our jobs, the idea that job stability is kind of one of the major things you look for. Like you don't look for doing a job you like. You don't look for doing a job where your skills overlap with the skills that the job requires. You're not looking for any of that. You're looking for a job that pays well. And one of the things that ends up doing is that highly skilled jobs earn a lot of money, and jobs that not a lot of people want to do, things like working in a convenience store, working in fast food. These are jobs that you might definitely enjoy it, but I think people enjoy the atmosphere and the people that they're working with more than the actual job itself. You might find it satisfying to make food for people and to serve them food and feed people. That's a very important thing, but you're not happy working there, and you're certainly not compensated for, like, if a CEO at a big corporation were forced to work for a week even at McDonald's for minimum wage, they would think, wow, my time is worth more than this. And the only reason they're allowed to command that is that they already have a lot of money. They already have a lot of power and influence. Whereas somebody who is 35 years old, has two kids, and is working at, say, Tim Hortons or McDonald's, their time is worth more than minimum wage too. Absolutely. Their time could be spent taking care of their family. Their time could be spent in any number of ways, but they don't have the power and influence to be able to say that, despite the fact that it's true. Whereas if you had a program like Basic Income instituted, you would be able to say, no, I'm not going to work fast food at minimum wage. If I take care of my family and take one or two shifts a week at, I don't know, somewhere that they like. If they like fashion, they could work in a clothing store. If they like, I don't know, if you like podcasting, you could podcast for a couple of days a week and actually try to make a little bit of money, or just pursue a passion project. You would see the way that the wealthiest people do. You would see how much your time can actually be worth when you're not forced to spend 40 or more hours a week of it working your butt off for what you feel probably rightfully is not enough money. And it just seems like, along with things like public education, along with things like healthcare, this just seems like the idea that you need to work at a kind of typical job or start your own business, be an entrepreneur. The idea that those are the only two paths to life satisfaction, I think is very it's misrepresenting the way that humans actually want to live their life. The incentive structure is all messed up. We kind of take it for granted today that the 40-hour work week, the 9 to 5 hours, is the way that things have always been. That's not the way that things have always been. In the time before, I think it was, I want to say, I've heard that it was Henry Ford, that basically instituted factories, and these things used to just be 7 days. You just work. You would wake up and you'd go to work and you'd get some amount of money. And Henry Ford was, I guess, probably one of the pioneers, if the anecdotes that I've heard are true, which, again, it doesn't actually really matter whether that specific anecdote is true, but the concept of weekends was kind of introduced because if Henry Ford is having his factory workers make cars for 7 days a week, those people have no spare time. They have no time to actually go and spend the money that they're making. They have no reason to buy, for instance, a car from Henry Ford, and therefore there's nobody to buy cars. If everyone's just working their entire lives, if everyone's working 9 to 5 during the week, there's no leisure during that time. The only people who are actually enjoying their time are people who retired or people on vacation. And that just seems incredibly backwards. I don't think we need whatever percent. I'm not sure the percentage of people who are on salaried jobs where they work set hours during the day, the typical 9 to 5 or 7 to 3 or whatever you have it. I often feel like with that 40-hour week, I'm waking up to go to work. And then when I get home from work, I'm, first of all, pretty tired. I'm not getting home until 4 or 5 p.m. And then I have 5 hours, let's say, where I eat, where I do something like some kind of relaxation or leisure activity, and then go to bed and repeat. And once I've done that 5 times, I've earned 2 days where really most of the things you're doing on the weekend are preparing for the following work week. Like most of the clothing I have is clothing that I wear to work, because that's most of where I am. Like 5 out of the 7 days a week, that's where I am. But I honestly think that without the pressure of feeling like you need to spend without the pressure of feeling like you need to spend 40 hours a week in the office, I think the incentive can kind of change, and people would be able to actually enjoy life without productivity dropping precipitously just because people don't have to work. I think we have seen that just because people don't have to work doesn't mean that they won't. Um, I know, for instance, in government, I see all the time people in the older generation, people who are coming up to retirement, typical retirement age now, are not retiring. They are either taking up a hobby, or they're starting up a business, or they're doing consulting, or they're taking another contract after retiring. The incentive to work doesn't come from being in poverty otherwise. The incentive to work comes from an innate need to fill your time. It comes from not wanting to be bored. And whether you spend that time adding to padding your company's bottom line as a salesperson or whatever, or whether you spend that time caring for your family or just spending time with people you care about, uh, I think society could be a lot better if we didn't all feel compelled. Like if if you're working, let's say like a typical middle class person, if you're making $50,000 a year and you're getting a little stir crazy, and maybe it's winter where you live, and you want to take a week's vacation without pay, you would feel like if you did that and that was your income, you wouldn't be able to necessarily, like, you might not be able to afford next month's rent or the mortgage payment on your house or whatever, or your car payment if you didn't work. Whereas under basic income, if you, let's say, are making $20,000 a year under basic income, that 1 week would be $385. Wouldn't it be satisfying to be able to take a vacation for X number of days or weeks and feel like you weren't going to come back to nothing, but you would come back to something? Again, I don't feel like if we look at $20,000 per year in basic income over 52 weeks, that works out to $385. That's not enough that anyone that I know is going to say, oh yeah, now I don't need to work. Like, you are going to need to work if you want to maintain your lifestyle that a middle class person has. You're not going to be able to just sit back and relax. You're going to foreclose on your house. Um, yeah, the idea that people need this incentive to work, honestly, I think is just completely backwards. I can't think of a better way to say it. And honestly, if I ever ran for office, if I ever did anything political at all, along with things like guaranteed housing programs, this is the kind of platform I would want to run on, is one with a basic income. I would honestly love to hear arguments against what I've been talking about, because any arguments that I have heard have all been theoretical and haven't really convinced me in any reasonable way that this wouldn't be a very good popular idea among, again, a great percentage of the population. I mean, there's no person that I can really envision who is living underneath the poverty line that would not want the opportunity to be brought to the poverty line and then kind of be starting from there. Why should your starting point be inherited from the amount of money your family had in raising you, or your ability to persevere through years of nose to the grindstone work to try to start a business or to kickstart your life? Why not give every person a kickstart that they need, that everyone is entitled to, and basically give everyone a fair platform to be able to better themselves? Set the worse off you can be at the poverty line, not at effectively $0 per year. I would love to hear arguments against a basic income. So please let me know. I'm Rob Attrell on Twitter. Uh, yeah, this is extremely important to me. I'm never going to stop thinking about it. I'm glad that I spent this time talking about it because it just feels so important, and it feels like we're really on the edge of something with technology, especially with things like automation taking over. It just seems like, how can this not be coming soon? Anyways, this has been Seeds of Thought, and talk to you next time. Bye.